In Book 4 of the Aeneid, the Roman poet Virgil describes rumor as a huge and horrid monster covered in many feathers. Beneath each plume is a darting eye, and beneath each pinion is a biting tongue. It is the speed of bad news than which nothing faster travels. And indeed, to high society, there is nothing more of a monster than a rumor. An ill-placed rumor can destroy the life of an aristocrat. And so, understandably, amongst aristocrats there is a phobia of rumors. And with that phobia comes the social convention, even the institution, of hoarding and guarding rumors more preciously than gold. Rumors, secrets, treachery, intrigue, and poison are all staples of Gothic mystery, and with it, Gothic horror. Therefore, we'll make good use of these themes in our adventure set in the Gothic Ravenloft domain of Borca. Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today we're going to discuss the Ravenloft domain of dread known as Borca, a domain based on Gothic intrigue and mystery. As always, with my Ravenloft videos, we'll go over what the domain is, talk about some inspirational media that'll help us get an imaginative grip on the domain, and then sketch out an adventure. In this case, the adventure takes place across 4 acts, and it will take PCs from level 7 up through level 10. That is, they will complete the adventure's end at level 10, and then, with DM's permission, level up to 11 at the conclusion. So let's get started. What is the domain of Borca? Well, Borca's nobles entangle the domain in a web of intrigues. While the common folk scrape for survival, the domain's callous aristocrats distract themselves with cruel diversions. They pay what they consider to be pittances of land, gold, and lives in pursuit of power, thrills, and the rarest pleasure, untarnished emotion. The common folk are merely tools to be exploited and discarded. Silver-tongued schemers use dreams and ambition to tempt innocents into debt, blackmail, and ruin, while furthering their rivalries or searching for decadent thrills. Guile and apathy are virtues in Borca, and none embody them more than the domain's 2 Darklords, the genius poisoner Ivana Boritsi and the childishly cruel stalker Ivan Delisnia. So Borca is a domain based around different aristocratic families vying for social power and trying to poison and backstab and betray each other in elaborate social schemes, probably with many different steps and many different kinds of accomplices, each of whom probably only knows some portion of the total plan. And unlike many Ravenloft domains, Borca actually has 2 Darklords. This sort of fits with the domain's theme of backstabbing. These 2 Darklords are rivals, they absolutely despise each other, but they are sort of opposites in the way that they vie for power. One of them, Ivana Boritsi, is a successful, prominent aristocrat who gets all the attention in the world but doesn't want any of it, and instead delights in poisoning people and pitting them against each other. The other Darklord, Ivan Delisnia, is a spoiled man-child of an elderly creature, craving all kinds of attention he can never get, and yet being able to spy on virtually anyone he wishes throughout the domain. He too uses written letters which he can send anywhere to pit people against each other and to ultimately serve him. Now when it comes to inspirational media for this domain, let's start with the 2 Darklords. First, Ivana Boritsi. Now Ivana fits an old cultural trope, which we might call the poison damsel. It goes back to classical Indian literature with Sanskrit tales of the Visha Kanya, seductive assassins who could kill with their bodily fluids. And the trope has prominent representation in popular media today through such characters as DC Comics' Poison Ivy. Ultimately, however, Poison Ivy and Ivana Boritsi seem to be based on 2 literary sources. The first is the 1844 story Rappaccini's Daughter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The titular character, Beatrice Rappaccini, was raised by a talented and creative botanist. More specifically, she was raised amongst poisonous plants and flowers so that she would not only be immune to their toxins, but also be toxic herself. This threatens to spell doom for the protagonist who has taken a liking to her. And indeed, the protagonist's efforts to be with her come to a tragic end. It's perhaps mainly from Rappaccini's Daughter, I think, that we get the modern idea of the plant-based poisonous woman. But there's also probably some influence from the series of short stories published in 1898 called The Sorceress of the Strand. Pseudonymously published by Elizabeth Thomasina Mead Smith under the name L.T. Mead, The Sorceress of the Strand features Madame Sarah, a clever criminal seductress and poisoner whose plans across 6 short stories run circles around the Sherlock Holmes-like detectives who would try to apprehend her. Creating weird plant-based concoctions and sneaking them into such unsuspecting places as people's own dental fillings. She is also an excellent influence for Ivana Baritsi. Now, the other Dark Lord of Borca, Ivan Delisnia, fits the cultural trope of the childlike dictator, or the man-child prince. Someone who cannot satisfy their childlike desires with their immense social power because their desires are so childlike. They want to treat people like toys, or play games of chance in which every occasion falls in their favor, or want something else impossible and, not getting it, revenge himself upon those closest. As cultural inspirations for this sort of personality, I'd first recommend the short story It's a Good Life by Jerome Bixby, published in 1953. This short story concerns Anthony Fremont, a supernaturally endowed human boy who's able to terrorize the countryside with his wishes and his mind-reading powers. As a result of his influence, the entire surrounding area is a blasted heath, and the few people around are paranoid slaves to him. This short story was adapted into an episode of The Twilight Zone, Season 3, Episode 8 in 1961, and that episode was both remade in Twilight Zone the movie from 1983 and lampooned in the second Simpsons Treehouse of Horror from 1991. Ivan Delisnia may not have all the powers of Anthony Fremont, but he does have all of the pettiness and all of the same sorts of desires. And speaking of the Twilight Zone, I'd also suggest episode 22 of Season 3 from 1962 called A Piano in the House. This episode follows the petty figure of Fitzgerald Fortune, who discovers he can use a player piano to extract confessions and other revealing behavior from his party guests. As a spoiled man-child, he uses the player piano to treat his guests like toys, and as soon as they find their freedom, he eventually finds himself abandoned, throwing a tantrum alone. This, too, I think perfectly fits the personality of Ivan Delisnia. Now, when it comes to Ravenloft adventures in Borca generally, as well as intrigue plots generally, I must recommend Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus from around 1590. Yes, it's Shakespeare, but pay attention to the plot involving Titus, Titus's family, Tamora, her family, Saturninus, Aaron, and all of the different webs of intrigue going on in that play, as well as their grisly conclusions. That's the stuff of which a Borca adventure is made. Try lifting some of those relations and intrigues and using them in your Borca adventure. There's also a couple of revenge stories by Edgar Allan Poe worth taking a look at. The famous 1846 The Cask of Amontillado, and the 1849 Hop Frog. In each case, the protagonist uses trickery and intrigue in order to take murderous revenge for an insult. And Borca is the sort of place where those plots, I bet, are frequent. And also, for Borca more than any other domain, I must mention the work of Edward Gorey. In particular, The Object Lesson and The Other Statue from 1958. Each book offers a disjointed non-narrative of detached illustrations and captions, but together they give the appearance of mystery and intrigue. Let me say that again, the appearance of mystery and intrigue. This is something that many DMs don't remember to incorporate when they write a mystery adventure, or when they write an intrigue adventure. It's great to have an adventure which is a mystery or which is an intrigue plot, but does it look like one of those? Does it strike the players as one of those aesthetically? Do they get the impression from the surroundings, the setting, and the characters that they're in one of those tales? To make sure they are, borrow some imagery from Edward Gorey. I'd also recommend The Evil Garden from 1966 and his animated opening to PBS Mystery, the series on TV. And finally, if you're interested in the topic of poisons and poisoning as a feature of social intrigue in your adventure in Borca, I give a light recommendation to The Royal Art of Poison from 2018 by Eleanor Herman. The first third or so is an enjoyable guide to how poisons were used and how they were feared in medieval, Renaissance, and Enlightenment era Europe. It's pretty cool. So, having covered inspirational media that helps us get an imaginative grip on the domain of Borca, let's sketch out a Borca adventure. Now, this adventure is pretty complicated because it involves a lot of different vying, spying powers that have different intentions that are using each other. Overall, the situation is this. The PCs are unwitting pawns of a noble house, House Okrotire. But House Okrotire is in turn a pawn of the two Darklords, Ivana Boritsi and Ivan Delisnia. In Act 1, the PCs are conscripted by the patriarch of House Okrotire, Olmo Okrotire, to infiltrate his daughter's criminal gang and to foil a robbery that they're planning. He wants the PCs to do this in order to scare her straight, so that she's a suitable heiress for his wealth. But as the PCs attempt to foil the robbery, there's an unexpected twist, and the robbery is kind of a success after all. The PCs then accompany the Okrotire daughter, named Nostalgia, to a party that she's supposed to go to, the party at Ivana Boritsi's. In Act 2, after some intriguing interactions with Ivana Baritsi herself, the PCs and the other guests are attacked by plant monsters that are secretly Ivana Baritsi's to control, and the Okrotire daughter Nostalia is secretly poisoned and turned into a living weapon. In Act 3, as the PCs report back to the patriarch of the Okrotire house, Olmo Okrotire, they discover that they are betrayed. In fact, Olmo sent a spy to observe the PCs help out with his daughter's attempt to cause a robbery, and he's going to use his influence to blame the entire robbery on them unless they do his work for free. And the work that he wants them to do is to escort her to the house of another noble family, the Ritters, so that Nostalia and Helmut Ritter, the heir to their fortune, can meet and hopefully get betrothed. Yet Nostalia ends up imprisoned for killing Helmut with a poisoned kiss. And it is at this time that the PCs get an offer from a mysterious, apparently child-aged correspondent who has been writing them letters this whole time. The correspondent offers to save the PCs and protect them from the Okrotire's blackmail if only they fight their way through the Ritter house, rescue Nostalia, and bring Nostalia to him. He, the correspondent, the letter writer, is none other than Ivan Delisnia. Assuming the PCs follow this task, we move on to the final act, Act 4, where the PCs bring the noble woman Nostalia Okrotire over to the house of Ivan Delisnia. Ivan reveals himself not to be a child at all, but a cadaverous skeleton of an old man adrift in a spider-like bed with long spindly legs. Nostalia screams horrified, goes mad, and the enraged Ivan attacks the PCs with his toys. A fight ensues, and victory permitting, the PCs escape and go on to their next adventure. Now that may have sounded pretty complicated, but don't worry, we're going to go through it rather carefully. In Act 1, the PCs are level 7, and they have arrived in Borca specifically at the behest of the royal house Okrotire, whose patriarch, Olmo Okrotire, has a job for them. The PCs begin in the grand receiving hall of the Okrotire house. Despite Borca being landlocked, the Okrotire family boasts of having been nautical explorers, and they have all kinds of sea fossils and giant sea skeletons on display in the room where they receive visitors. Olmo is an old man, and he explains that he doesn't have any heirs except for his daughter Nostalia. But unfortunately, Nostalia is falling into criminality. This will not do. A criminal cannot inherit the wealth and the name of the Okrotire family, he says. So here's the situation. In 3 days, his daughter Nostalia is supposed to attend a fancy party thrown by the greatest noble of all, Ivana Baritsi. However, Nostalia is planning not to attend that party at all, and instead to meet up with her gang of highwaymen and rob a family of guests who are on the way to that party. Olmo wants that attempt at robbery to fail. He wants it to go disastrously and frighteningly bad for his daughter, so bad that she is scared straight into being a prim and proper noble woman again. To this end, Olmo asks the PCs to do 2 things. First, travel to the house of the noble family who Nostalia is planning on robbing on the road. That family, the Nobriskovs, need to be warned. But they shouldn't be warned about a robbery. If the Nobriskovs are told about a robbery on the road, they might not attempt to go to the party at all. And if they don't go to the party at all, there won't be any foiled robbery to scare Nostalia straight, you see. Olmo wants the PCs to make sure that the Nobriskovs hit the road and attempt to go to the party, but they do so with extra guard. So the PCs should pretend to be woodsmen or other experts of the surrounding region, warning the Nobriskovs that there are packs of wolves in the area. So that's the first task that Olmo gives the PCs. Go to the house of the Nobriskovs and warn them that there are extra wolves in the area, so if they're attempting to hit the road to go to a party, they should bring some extra guards. Now, when the PCs attempt to do this, the Nobriskovs are actually just going to laugh at them, because little do the PCs know, although they will soon find out, the Nobriskovs are werewolves, and they do not fear wolves. The second, and more important task that Olmo sets for the PCs, is to infiltrate Nostalia's criminal gang so that they can participate in the attempted robbery of the Nobriskovs and foil it from within when the time is right. The PCs, of course, can meet Nostalia in a tavern, or on a street, or in the Okrotire house itself, but when they try to join Nostalia's gang, she has a test for them. Nostalia wants to rob a certain crypt in the local cemetery. It's the crypt of a famous nobleman, Solano Baritsi. She's heard there's treasure in there and she wants some of it. If the PCs accompany her to rob the crypt of Solano Baritsi, she'll let them into her gang. And for that crypt, we're going to use the Crypt of the Hell Riders from Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. It's in Chapter 3, pages 101 to 103. We're going to remove the enormous monoliths that are located where it is and just say that it's located in a cemetery. And we're also going to remove the Death Knight Olanthius, as well as any other specific reference to Avernus or El Terrell or anything else in that campaign. We're just going to keep the map, as well as all of the undead monster encounters. You could throw in some treasure, like jewelry that features the Boritsi crest, as well as some usual coins. Now, once the PCs complete these two tasks, warning the Nabriskov family and infiltrating Nastalia's gang, they receive a black envelope addressed to them by name. The envelope should appear out of nowhere, falling from the sky into their lap or just appearing amongst their equipment, and when they open it, they find that there's a white sheet of paper with a message written in childlike script in multicolored crayon. Addressing them by name, it says, "I think you are amazing and I like watching your adventures. I think it's neat that you know about wolves, and I think it's neat that you fight ghosts. I also like the nice lady you are with. Do you think we can be friends? What is your favorite dessert? Mine is strawberry cake. Sincerely, Ivan." That's it. There's no way for the PCs to tell where the letter came from or to answer it. They just get that letter. Now, later that week, when it's time for the PCs to accompany Nastalia on her attempted robbery of the Nabriskov family on their way to the Boritsi party, they gather in the bushes along the side of the road at dusk. Upon nightfall, they hear a carriage approaching. It bears the Nabriskov crest, which can easily be identified in the light of the full moon. The PCs should notice that, far from bringing additional guards, the Nabriskov carriage is entirely unguarded. Nastalia should comment on this and laugh about it as she jumps out into the road and waves her weapon, flagging down the carriage. Now, the Nabriskov carriage is actually completely shuttered and curtained, so that there's no way to see who's inside. The driver is entirely cloaked and masked and covered with a scarf and a hat. The driver begs Nastalia and the PCs to let them pass, and begs them even more not to open the carriage, not to open the shutters, not to draw the curtain. But Nastalia does exactly this, and out from the carriage's interior explode into the light of the full moon 3 werewolves. The driver draws back their hood and mask and scarf and reveals themselves to be Yvette, the Nabriskov's matriarch. She cries out for peace as the werewolves attack the PCs. Now, assuming the PCs subdue or defeat the werewolves, reducing them to 0 hit points, have them turn into injured humans, and have Yvette beg for their lives. She confesses that their family are actually mostly a family of werewolves, and that the Briskovs had long since tried to keep this a secret. Indeed, they suspect that Ivana Boritsi invited them out to a garden party tonight in order to expose them. That's why they intended to only show up briefly and only inside, before quickly leaving. Now exposed, Yvette Nabriskov begs the PCs and Nastalia not to expose their secrets and offers them all that they are carrying, all the riches they've got on hand, in order to encourage their silence. At this point, Nastalia turns to the PCs and thanks them for ensuring that the robbery went perfectly. She collects the riches, smirks about how they've got a secret they could use for further blackmail, and then says that since she's in good spirits, she and the PCs should go to Ivana Boritsi's party. Thus, Act 1 of our adventure ends, the PCs level up to 8, and we continue on to Act 2, which takes place at the manor of Ivana Boritsi. The PCs arrive at Ivana Boritsi's villa at the start of Act 2, and they are level 8. Nastalia is with them, and they're probably loaded up with treasure that they stole from the Nabriskov family. Now, Ivana Boritsi, looking pale and tragic and elegantly dressed, greets them. But she tells them that they should go upstairs and wash off, since, after all, they look like a gang of highwaymen. She says this latter remark with emphatic suggestion, but does not elaborate or make it into an accusation. Now, for a map of the Boritsi Manor, use the Castellanter Villa from Waterdeep Dragon Heist. In Chapter 6, page 119. Say that, at Ivana's request, a guard escorts the PCs up to Area 16B, where they can clean themselves up, and then back down to the garden at C25, where the party is. Feel free to fill the villa with all kinds of exotic-looking nobles and weird-looking plants, especially. And on the way to the garden, have the PCs encounter a large, striking portrait of a fancily dressed noble. Describe it in some way that compels the PCs to stop and actually look at it. When they do, Ivana will suddenly appear behind them and say, "Ah, my great cousin, Solano Boritsi. His memory is sacred around here, you know." She'll then look at the PCs in Nastalia and pointedly ask whether they've ever heard of Solano Boritsi. Now, of course, to get into Nastalia's gang, the PCs had to help her break into and rob the crypt of Solano Boritsi. so they're being scrutinized and there's pressure for them to lie. Regardless of what they say, and regardless of what they roll in the charisma checks, however, Ivana will keep her cool and just coyly laugh and say that's interesting. After that, Ivana will walk with the PCs out to the garden, and as she does so, she's going to mention that the Nabriskovs are not present. She's going to ask the PCs why they think that is, and whether it's because they're werewolves. And again, she'll offer the suggestion jokingly, but observe the PC's response. Whatever the PCs say, she'll treat it like a little joke and she'll laugh herself, before going to mingle with the other guests. As she mingles, Ivana will slip out of sight and reappear on the balcony overlooking the garden. When she does, the PCs, Nostalgia, and the entire party are going to be attacked by plant monsters. These monsters arise from the exotic gardens in which the party is held, and they include a few twig blights, a few vine blights, but most importantly, a hydra, which we are reskinning and altering in a few ways. We're going to say that the Hydra's creature type is a plant, that its body is an enormous shaggy root ball, that its necks are vines, and that its heads are like the heads of Venus flytraps, but colossal. We're going to change its sight to blind sight, and we'll also say that the regrowth of its heads is stopped not only by fire damage, but by necrotic damage as well. It's a cool monster, and you can give it some legendary resistance if you feel that's appropriate. And during this entire fray, Ivana from the balcony will pretend to be horrified and scared for her guests, but secretly, she orchestrated the attack. She knows that the PCs and Nostalgia robbed the crypt of her great cousin, and she wants revenge. So during this battle, Nostalgia will be hit by a plant monster, and that plant monster will poison her. This is a very special poison, and it will turn Nostalgia into a living weapon. So after the PCs defeat the plant monster, Ivana Boritsi will thank them for saving the day, announce that the party is through, that the guests are dismissed, and the PCs should take Nostalgia back to House Okrotire. Along the way, Nostalgia complains that she's nauseous and she feels sick. Thus ends Act 2 of our adventure, and the PCs level up to 9. Act 3 begins with the PCs awakening at House Okrotire, where they've been invited to stay, and there's another letter addressed to them by name in a black envelope amongst their equipment. The letter is written again in colorful crayon in the same childlike script, and it expresses admiration for how bravely the PCs fought those nasty plant monsters. It asks whether the nice lady who is with them is okay, and it also asks them what their favorite toys to play with are. He says he likes dolls. Sincerely, Ivan. Again, there's no way for the PCs to respond or tell where this letter came from, it just showed up. But after they awaken, the PCs are summoned to meet Olmo Okrotire in the receiving room, the room full of those nautical exhibits. There, Olmo will ask whether the PCs were successful in preventing the heist, and whether they were successful in escorting Nostalgia to the party of Ivana Boritsi. As the PCs describe the evening, either truthfully or with dishonesty, Olmo's going to pace back and forth, and he will subtly cast Pass Wall and enter behind some protective crystal glass, shatterproof. From there, once the PCs have finished talking, Olmo is going to reveal the truth. Unbeknownst to the PCs, Olmo hired a spy to go and observe how the PCs participated in the Nabriskov robbery. He had the spy draw sketches and everything. Olmo plans to use those sketches to turn the PCs in as criminals and blame the entire criminal activity that his daughter's been involved in on them, unless they serve his house as dutiful chamberlains. Olmo issues this threat without fear, for he is now behind protective crystal. You can say that spells bounce off it or whatever. And he has already arranged for his personal guard to show up in a few moments. Olmo explains that he needs unique, talented individuals, not just to scare Nostalgia straight once, but to attend her at all times and make sure she's always on the correct path. That'll be the PCs. Now, they can take this job voluntarily if they like, in which case they're going to be rewarded with riches, or they can resist, in which case they're going to meet the wrong end of the spears of his guard. And here, since the goal actually is to compel cooperation from the PCs, be judicious about whether you use more carrot or stick in this encounter. The point is, this whole assignment was a setup. The PCs were tricked into participating in a robbery with Olmo's daughter so that they could be blamed for the robbery unless they cooperate with Olmo. And what does Olmo want them to do? Why, it's nothing too special. Olmo Okrotire just wants the PCs to escort Nostalgia to House Ritter. It's another noble house. And there at House Ritter, the PCs will make sure that Nastalia has a favorable interaction with the heir to the wealth of House Ritter, a young man named Helmut Ritter. Just get Nastalia and Helmut on the way to being betrothed, says Olmo, and everything will be just fine for now. So that's the PC's next assignment, take it or take it. Escort Nastalia over to the House Ritter and have her meet some young man named Helmut. Assuming they do this, Nastalia complains more of being nauseous and feeling dizzy, but no medicine check actually reveals anything specific wrong with her. And as the PCs arrive with Nastalia at House Ritter, they receive another letter addressed to them in a black envelope. Now this time, the letter is again from Ivan, but it gives them instructions on where to meet him and why. The letter says, "It's too bad the mean old man is hurting them like this. While the nice lady is busy," the letter says, "they should come and visit him, so they can talk about getting better." And there are some directions over to the House Delisnia. You could even have the letter include a drawing which shows the PCs defending innocent people from werewolves, as opposed to the account that Olmo threatened to give. Now, when the PCs approach House Delisnia, they find that it is in a dilapidated, abandoned state. It doesn't seem like there's anyone there. And yet, you'd think there were children, because there are all manner of children's toys, most of them broken, strewn about on the floor. As the PCs enter, they should hear Ivan's voice echo throughout the house. They shouldn't be able to see him anywhere, but they should get the impression from his voice, both its grammar and its pitch, that Ivan is a child. Ivan is going to ask the PCs who they are, what's going on, and what's going on with Nastalia. Ivan is going to express a lot of interest in Nastalia and confess that he wants Nastalia to be his playmate. He reassures the PCs that if they just bring Nastalia to him to be his playmate, he can protect them from the mean old man, indicating Olmo Okrotire. If they ask how, he can mention the power that he has to observe everything that's going on in the domain, and the power he has to send letters wherever he wants. He won't describe this power like a malevolent Darklord, of course. He's going to talk about it like a kid who thinks that he's got a special power, like a superpower or something. Now, Ivan will try to convince the PCs to accept this assignment, and assuming they do, they go back to House Ritter. But there's yet another unexpected twist. For it turns out that since being poisoned at Ivana Boritsi's party, Nastalia has been turned into a living weapon. She's been nauseous and dizzy because she carries poison in her blood. And once she met Helmut Ritter, the two of them got pretty friendly. So friendly that she kissed him. And that kiss was poisonous. Now, when the PCs return to House Ritter, they find it is on full lockdown. This is because, they say, Nastalia tried to kill Helmut Ritter with a kiss, a poisoned kiss. He is currently suffering in bed, and the chances of his survival are grim. Meanwhile, Nastalia herself is held prisoner on the top floor, and there are guards everywhere. This situation, by the way, is secretly Ivana Boritsi's revenge. Now, when the PCs encounter this obstacle and talk about it a bit, they will again receive a letter from Ivan. This letter will be a bit more forthright and bossy. It'll tell the PCs not to be afraid, that they can do it, that they just need to fight their way through, rescue Nastalia like she's a princess, and bring her back to be his playmate. If they do that, everything else will be fine. He can protect them. Now, if the PCs agree to this, we're going to use a certain map for House Ritter. It's the occupied mansion from Chapter 6, pages 143 to 149 from Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. We're going to reskin all the Draconians so that they're humans with magic, and we'll reskin the Dragonelles as giant ravens that spit acid instead of fire. That's more appropriate to the aesthetic of Borka, I think. Nastalia will be held in Area O10 at the very top floor, and assuming the PCs fight their way up, rescue her, and fight their way back down, Act 3 of the adventure comes to an end, they level up to 10, and we proceed to Act 4, the final act. Act 4 begins with the PCs rushing with Nastalia from House Ritter over to the house of Ivan Delisnia. Along the way, Nastalia is confused and disoriented. She says she didn't mean to poison anyone with a kiss, she doesn't know what's going on, and she has some time to talk with the PCs and theorize about exactly what happened. Nastalia is perfectly willing to go to Ivan Delisnia's house, especially since she does not want to go home, and she doesn't want to seek the company of her criminal accomplices right now. However, when the PCs arrive at House Delisnia with Nastalia, that is when there's a horrific reveal. After Ivan introduces himself in the way that a child would introduce themselves, in a voice that sounds like a childlike voice, Ivan, or rather I should say Ivan's spider-like bed, strides forth from the shadows. For the first time, the PCs and Nastalia get a view of Ivan Delisnia, a cadaverous old man, more skeleton than flesh. He looks like the Crypt Keeper or something. And from that undead-looking mouth, he issues a childlike greeting. Hello, is it time to play? To make it even more horrifying, let Ivan hoist high the disemboweled corpse of Nastalia's father, Olmo Okratire. He could be done up like some kind of doll. Ivan can enthusiastically announce that Nastalia no longer has to worry about her father spying on her or trying to control her. Now they can just play forever. Nastalia is going to scream and go mad at the situation, which in turn will anger Ivan and he'll throw a tantrum. This tantrum takes the form of combat. Ivan Delisnia, with the statistics of a Drider, is going to attack the PCs with a host of his personal toys. For the toys, I would just reskin some goblins, just say that they're constructs. If you want, you can use some of the clockwork monsters from Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. But there's nothing wrong with just reskinning goblins as constructs and saying that they're toys. Now, when the PCs reduce Ivan to 0 hit points, he appears to die, but will soon start regenerating. However, if they reduce him to 0 hit points, they will be able to escape, which they cannot do otherwise, for as soon as the battle begins, we're going to say that the doors to Ivan's house lock and seal themselves with magical force. So it's only after the PCs defeat Ivan Delisnia and his toys that they're able to truly escape. If they want to, they can take Nastalia with them, but as they leave, either they continue their adventures in Borca, or the mists of Ravenloft swirl around them and spirit them off to their next adventure. So that's our adventure in Borca. What do you think? Did it have enough intrigue, or maybe too much? Did you find it confusing at all? And how about the incorporation of the Darklords? Do you think they played enough of a role? If not, how would you have them play more of a role? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to do all the internet things. Click like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell if you want notifications on updates on this channel. And thanks!